Welcome to Even Tacos Fall Apart, a podcast with real stories, real struggles, and real hope. I'm MommaFoxFire, and in today's episode, I'm joined by Josh Shea to discuss a sensitive and important topic, pornography addiction, and the profound impact it can have on individuals and relationships. We'll also talk about infidelity and betrayal trauma in this episode. Pornography addiction is a growing concern in today's digital age, affecting individuals from all walks of life. The consequences can extend beyond the individual struggling with addiction, impacting partners and loved ones as well. I want to take a moment and point out that in no way am I saying that all porn is bad porn. Y'all know I'm very sex positive, and I know there are healthy ways to enjoy sexually explicit content that was created in a moral and ethic manner. Just as we've had conversations about alcohol addiction without saying all alcohol is bad, what we are talking about today is porn addiction. And I understand that the porn industry is problematic in some ways as well. You do you. We're talking about the addiction part today. In this episode, we'll explore the complexities of pornography addiction and betrayal trauma, seeking to understand the emotional, psychological, and relational toll it can take. We'll provide insights into the signs of addiction and the impact on relationships and the journey towards healing and recovery. Whether you're personally grappling with pornography addiction, have been impacted by betrayal trauma or infidelity, or are seeking to better understand these topics, this episode has something for you. My hope is to shed light on a topic that is often stigmatized and provide a compassionate space for healing and growth. So let's dive into this conversation today on Even Tacos Fall Apart. Hello and welcome back. Thank you for being here for another Mental Health Monday. I'm really excited for our conversation tonight. We are going to be talking about pornography addiction and betrayal trauma coaching, which I am. It sounds like maybe a heavier topic, but I actually think this is going to be a really good conversation. So we're gonna get into a little bit of the details here. But I am joined tonight by Josh Shea, and Josh is a pornography addiction expert, certified betrayal trauma coach, which is why those are our topics tonight. He's also a therapeutic disclosure specialist and the author of 4 books about pornography addiction, including I'm reading this book about porn addiction for a friend, which is published last year, right? So very recent. And since 2018, Josh has given more interviews about pornography addiction and betrayal trauma than anybody in the world. He uses his wealth of research and personal story to promote ideas that porn addiction spans all demographics, and those with the problem should seek help before it's too late. He also speaks extensively about the issue of working through betrayal trauma, especially with the partners of addicts and those who are facing infidelity. Prior to admitting to his 24-year addiction to pornography in 2014, Josh was a prominent magazine publisher, award-winning journalist, film festival founder, and politician in Central Maine. Sober since April 2014, Joshua still lives in Central Maine with his wife and 2 children, and their current animal count is 4 dogs and 7 cats. But it is ever changing. So very glad to have you here today. Josh, thank you for joining us and taking the time out of your evening.
Thank you. And I do have to say that we are at 8 cats now.
So it changed. It changed recently.
Yes. It changed about 3 weeks ago. We foster puppies and kittens. And every once in a while, one of us falls in love with one and we have a foster fail. And we just fell in love with this gray kitten that we had been fostering with its 2 sisters. And so we kept him, and we're up to 8 cats now.
That sounds like a foster success, not a foster fail.
Yeah, well, I think the people at the shelter see it as a success.
Yes, yeah, for sure. So everyone in your house loves cats?
Everyone in our house loves cats. Not everyone in our house loves dogs. But Fortunately, my wife and I, who are the decision makers, do. Yeah, yep. So we have, right now, and again, ours is ever changing as well, which Bite, who is here in the chat, can attest to, is because I'm a sucker. We have 3 dogs now. I almost said 2, but we now have 3. Only 1 cat, which my kids want more cats. A turtle, and 5 snakes. Did I forget something? I don't think so. I think that's it. But it's one of those things that it's like, every time we see a cat in the pet store, Mom, can we have a cat? Mom, can we have a cat? I'm like, I don't know about that. Yep.
But dogs, I'm a sucker for dogs for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I love fostering the puppies. When they're 5, 6 weeks old, they're wonderful. And it's funny because after with the dogs, you only keep them for about 2 weeks usually. And at the end of those 2 weeks, their puppyhood starts to become almost like being teenagers and they act like they own the house. So it's sometimes it's not too hard to give them back depending on how much damage they're starting to cause.
Yeah, I have a teenager puppy right now, and he's a handful. He's got so
Yeah.
much energy. It's crazy. Fortunately, I also have a 9-year-old who can match that energy.
There you go.
Your background is in journalism and media, which we talked about with your bio a little bit. What did you love about doing that, and what did you hate about that career?
I loved that it was different every day. I met a lot of famous people, but I met so many fascinating people. And just the ability to tell stories and some of the experiences that I got. I don't know anybody else who hung out with police at a ongoing bank robbery, hearing, the chats over the phone. I don't know anybody else who's had 3 free hot air balloon rides. I've been to, countless fancy restaurants on those people. I've been to so many different events that I've reviewed and even some travel that's happened. It allowed me to experience things and meet people that I otherwise never would.
Yeah, those all sound like really cool experiences. That I don't know people who can say those things either.
Yeah, no, it's great. That the thing I miss most about it is that I don't always have a different adventure every day, and that really was when I was working in the media, a different adventure almost every day.
Mm-hmm. So what was the downside of that?
There is no money in it, and there's even less money. There's even less money now than there was before, because when I started working at a local daily newspaper in 1993, I think it was only 2 years later when we got our first computer that had internet there, and all the old timers were like, "This isn't going to be anything. This is just this is a bulletin board. It's nothing." And there were a lot of us who were younger who said, "No, this thing is going to wipe out the world as we know it." And you look at now, I don't know if my kids know what telephone books are. I don't know if they know what encyclopedias are. They will never use a travel agent. And unfortunately, I don't think they'll probably ever read a newspaper.
Yeah. I just was hearing an article. I just heard a news story. I can't remember. I wish I could remember which newspaper it was. It was a major newspaper, like not the New York Times, I don't think, but something equivalent to that. They're stopping print completely. Everything's going to be online. And they were talking about the drawbacks and concerns and the people that are going to get left behind, mostly older people. And it's like, yeah, you're not going to be able to clip out the articles like you used to be able to and put them into a scrapbook or anything like that. You'll have to print them out and then cut them out and then put them in. But yeah, it's changed vastly.
I was at my parents' house the other day. They're both in their mid-70s. And while I didn't really recognize it at the time, about 2 years ago, we switched to completely streaming for our media at home. 100%. And my parents still have the old cable box and the remote. And it was just like, wow, I forgot. It's almost like an antique that you are using a cable box and not just streaming everything that you're watching. And, that's what the internet did. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. But it was very clear to me very early on that newspapers had a limited shelf life. I still believe they do. That's why I moved over to lifestyle magazines the last 7 or 8 years that I was in that business and actually started my own company, producing 3 different lifestyle magazines for different regions in the Northeast up here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's just different. My kid knows how to use an encyclopedia and a phone book, but likely will never need to. I don't think my kids know. I'm sure that we've talked about encyclopedias, at least with my older one. But I don't think that my kids could use a phone book. they would pick it up easily, obviously, but no, I don't think they've ever had to.
Well, yeah, no, you just type in the name into Google.
Yep. That's exactly what you do. Do you have a serial killer or true crime story that fascinates you?
Yeah, my best friend is a very prolific true crime writer. And some of the books he's done, some of the projects he's done have been made into movies, have been made into TV shows. And I've been able to hang out on sets with him. I've learned a lot about what he's done. And I think the most interesting thing that I can say is that I designed the website for Carl Denaro, who was only one of 2 people who survived the Son of Sam.
Wow. Yeah. Yep. That's that's an intense one too.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know what really happened, and he's not sure that it was Berkowitz who actually shot the gun. And he's still. I forward him the email that comes in, and some people have all kinds of conspiracy theories and are all over the place. He still gets email.
Well, I guess they just did like a new.
I think Netflix had a show
Netflix has
about
a new thing, so I'll bet that's a little bit of a resurgence, right, of those emails.
Yeah, and then the other big one that my friend did was right before Tiger King got huge, right at the beginning of the pandemic. Yeah. The big documentary on Netflix was "Don't F with Cats."
Oh my God, that one! There were times that I had to stop that documentary. I had to be like, I need a second.
My friend is the only person who has actually interviewed the dude in prison in Canada. They couldn't even get him for the Netflix show, so they were basing a lot of the of what he said based on the book that my friend wrote.
And that documentary was hard to watch in parts.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I know that there were some people who were like, I went and watched the whole video of whatever of the things that they showed. They're like, I went and watched the whole part of that video. I'm like, I couldn't. Even what was in there was too much for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Man, yeah. True crime is one of those things that you can obsess over it. Some people think that that's a bad thing. Some people, like me, deal with it a little bit differently. But yeah, it's really interesting to hear people's ties to it.
And my brother, while I haven't worked with him directly because he just returned from Los Angeles, for the last 15 years, he's worked for a production company that makes a lot of the television shows for Investigation Discovery Channel. Yeah. So My Wife Almost Murdered Me or Blood Brothers and this stuff, he's been an executive producer on a lot of those shows.
Oh, that's cool. So you've got a lot of connections coming from all sides.
Yep. I haven't written anything about crime yet, but I do have a few of those true crime connections.
Yep. Bite Mark says, I thought he was going to say his best friend was a prolific serial killer. Oh, that's great. Do you want to share your writer friend's name and we can?
Yeah, it's Brian Whitney, okay. And he's got a ton of books out there. And I believe that they are. I think they just optioned another one of his books to potentially be a series. That the real money in writing true crime is when Hollywood comes knocking and picks it up. And he's had some success there. So fingers crossed he keeps getting more of it.
So it looks like The Supreme Gentleman Killer, My Son the Killer, Exit Plan. Those sound
My Son the Killer was the one that Don't F with Cats was made on.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well I'm gonna post. You know what? I'm gonna add that one first of all. I'm gonna add that one to my want to read, and then I'll post his general author page on Goodreads. So if anybody wants to check out his work, you're more than welcome to.
Oh, he's a great writer.
Yeah. What led up to your admission of having a pornography addiction in 2014? Just tell us a little bit of your story.
Yeah, well, what was interesting was I was also an alcoholic. and I got fired from my job at the magazine. I was 1/3 owner, and I ran day-to-day operations, and I let the alcohol get out of control, and I made 2013, 10-year anniversary. I don't remember most of 2013. It was a blur of drunken, poor decision-making, and it was in March of 2014 that they basically fired me, and within a few days, family, friends, a couple other people had a intervention for me. So I was shipped off to Palm Springs, California, where I entered a center that I spent 70 days at to deal with my alcoholism. After about 3-4 weeks there, my case manager, who I had, multiple one-on-one meetings with every week, he could sense something was up with my sexual attitudes or things I was saying. So he had me meet with a certified sex addiction therapist off campus. And it was actually this CSAT who introduced me to the phrase porn addiction. I had never heard of it. I knew that I watched obsessively. I knew that I watched differently than a lot of people. But I had really just chalked it up to it was another bad decision I made when I drank. And it wasn't until he showed me that, he was the one who showed me that, number one, addiction actually is a disease. It's not a moral failure. And he showed me that pornography addiction was a real disease. I had it, and that it predated my alcoholism by a couple of years, and actually probably caused more problems in my life than the alcoholism did over the years. So I left that facility, came home, worked with my therapist here, and started to do research about it as much as I could about porn addiction, even though there wasn't much out there at the time. And then finally, my therapist suggested I go to a inpatient rehab for porn addiction, even though I hadn't used in several months. So in the summer of 2015, I went down to Argyle, Texas, and went to the Sante Center, and I was there for 7 weeks dealing with my porn addiction issues, which was absolutely the most transformative experience of my life.
Interesting. So you said that you went to the treatment center even though you hadn't used in a few months. So was that something did they teach you different coping strategies? Like, what was the transformative part for you whenever you went to that center?
It was that, and nothing slighting that my first rehab, which was just for people with drugs and alcohol, but this place focused on trauma. This place focused on origin stories. This place focused on mind, body, and soul. And that's what it really was it looked at the whole package. I truly believe that addiction is just a symptom of a bigger problem. And my first rehab treated the symptom of alcoholism, where that second rehab treated the problem of unresolved trauma.
All right, I do just want to comment. You said the first one was in California?
Palm Springs, California.
I do want to comment that sounds backwards to me. It sounds like the mind, body, soul one should be California, and the treating the symptoms should be Texas. I can say that because I'm in Texas. But I'm really glad to hear that those centers were helpful. I think that people don't realize that addiction truly is a disease, and it's hard to get that through your head a little bit if you've been told that it's, a personal failing or a decision you're making and that you have control over, but it's really a disease. That's an important distinction for sure.
Absolutely.
So we do have one question in the chat that I want to get to, and that is Bite Mark asks, what is your favorite poem?
My favorite poem is Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost.
Okay. All right, so Stopping by Woods. Grab that one. On a snowy evening. I'm not familiar with that one. So what makes that one your favorite?
It's very stoic, and it's very, especially growing up here in Maine, where it's cold and dreary so much of the year, yet you still have to move forward, whether you have commitments, whether it's just to keep yourself alive, whatever it is. You can't stop. You can't quit. You have to keep moving forward, like it or not. Pull up your big boy pants and do what you have to do.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one. Thank you. I don't think we've had that one before, so that's really cool. Oops. There we go. Get that off of there. There we go. So, all right. What is the difference between being addicted to porn and just enjoying porn?
I think it's the same as being addicted to alcohol or just enjoying it, or being addicted to gambling and just enjoying it. You know, it's one of these things where I always tell people food addiction doesn't take place in the stomach, cocaine addiction doesn't take place in the nose, and sex and porn addiction doesn't take place between your legs. It all takes place in your brain. And having met, being an alcoholic has, also showed me this. But meeting addicts of every, variety out there, it's amazing how much we have in common. And when you study the neuroscience of it, 95% of addiction is the same. Addiction is addiction is addiction is addiction. And while there are some differences between chemical addictions and process addictions, I became a porn addict at 12. I became an alcoholic at 14. These two things, whether I was in high school or college or early in my career, whether I was dating or alone or married, it didn't matter where I was in life. These two things were my crutches. They were always there for me, or I saw that they were always there for me, when in fact they were always there nagging me. And especially in that last year or two, when I just had to use basically to stay alive, that it was really like any other addiction. And that's one of the things that I try to demystify. Be like, oh, well, if you got to have an addiction, porn or sex addiction's the one to have. And it's like, no, it really isn't. Addiction sucks. And all addiction sucks. It's really like any other addiction. It just happens to be that viewing sexual imagery and alcohol were my two things. And I think that's mainly because, as the son of two super Catholic school teachers, those are the two things I could get my hands on, that I was exposed to. I was never going to find heroin where I lived. I was not going to be introduced to casinos or sports gambling up in the Northeast. I had these two things, and I had a rough childhood when it came to certain things to do with trauma, and I found relief in the alcohol and in the porn, much like people find relief in any other substance or behavior.
Do you think if you'd been exposed to some other things, such as heroin or gambling or something like that, do you think your addictions might have been different? Do you think it's just that addiction as a disease itself, or do you think that you're predisposed to these two in some way?
I don't really think you're predisposed to it. Now, I think that you will see it generationally in families, because that's what you see growing up. But if you go to a AA meeting, there's nobody under 30 there who's just an alcoholic anymore. Yeah. People are being cross-addicted more than ever before. And I think that while, theoretically, I should have probably driven my car into a house long before porn ever became a problem. If I had used heroin or certain drugs, meth, I probably would be dead by now. I still think that there's a good chance that I would be dead by now anyway, because shortly before that intervention, I had started looking for amphetamines and trying to find a connection to those, because I needed to stay up 24 hours a day. And you can only drink so much Red Bull and tequila in a day. And, I was looking for something else. So I'm not so much about the specific addiction as there is that addictive piece. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it doesn't affect me anyway, but I can go to a casino I win $30, I lose $30, whatever. But I can sit there at a slot machine and, it comes up bar, and that third wheel is still spinning. And I can feel that dopamine hit of, come on, be a bar, be a bar. And I can see how I have never played a table game in my life because I'll never allow myself to. And, there are certain things that I do watch out for. I would never recreationally use a drug at this point. I just know that I am the type of person who's wired to get obsessed with things. And much like work, I was a workaholic. I got obsessed with work, and that probably did just as much damage to my family as any of the other addictions did. I needed to have quality coping skills. I needed to have quality survival skills, but I developed my survival and coping skills as a 5-year-old when I was trying to dodge being abused. And unfortunately, the coping skills of a 5-year-old child in crisis are not the everyday skills of a 25-year-old guy or a 35-year-old guy, yet that's what I was working with.
Yeah. I can't even imagine having to come up with coping skills that early. I know that that's what leads a lot of people to so many different things, not just addiction, but lots of different things that causes so many problems, just that trauma in early childhood. And I like that you said that the origin story piece of that treatment center is what helped you the most and was the most transformative, because I think that a lot of people are carrying around this trauma of their childhoods. And they either have not resolved it or aren't aware of it. They've shoved it down so far, and it's just part of their coping skills that they've developed, and that's why. But yeah, it's hugely formative, and something that I think everyone would benefit from therapy to begin with. And this is one of the main reasons. There's all kinds of things in our childhood, whether you had a good childhood or not. I had a great childhood. I got shit to work out from my childhood still. That's okay. That's how it is.
And I tell people, I still have, I was in therapy before I got help for my addictions off and on for years. And I still to this day have these aha moments where it's like, oh, why didn't I realize that when I was 15 years old? Right. Something just finally clicked 30 years after it should. And I don't have as many aha moments as I did right at the beginning of recovery, but they still hit me. And I love them because it's like better late than never.
Yep, absolutely. Bite Mark says, just the words Red Bull and tequila make me shudder. It sounds okay.
The thing is, you have a lot of energy, but you're not going to remember anything. So the stories the next day are always good.
Yeah, and always a surprise.
Yes, exactly.
If you're just tuning in, we were talking about pornography addiction. We're going to talk about betrayal trauma coaching as well here in just a little bit. If you have any questions, there is a queue open, ! Q. Follow with your question. That'll put it into the queue and we can get it asked here. So does porn addiction cause harm in relationships?
Yeah, especially if it's kept hidden. Now, statistically, I can tell you that when porn is introduced in a marriage, that marriage is 3 times more likely to end in divorce. But what's the real kicker is when one member, usually the male, hides their porn use from their partner, and then it gets discovered over time. That's what leads to the betrayal trauma. Or, as we're seeing more and more in younger people, is that it's actually leading to porn-induced erectile dysfunction. So a lot of these younger men in relationships are not able to perform any other way except if pornography is actively playing in the room.
So you said if porn gets introduced in a marriage, are you meaning like people watching it together or separately?
Yes. Okay. A lot of times, you would hear a lot of times, and I wish marriage counselors would stop doing this, is, trying to spice things up in the bedroom, because that is just the biggest recipe for disaster. And what you often get is two people who are very different places when it comes to pornography, very different places when it comes to their boundaries of what's acceptable in the bedroom. And as far, and there are some couples who love watching pornography start from day one. But for those couples who introduce it into the marriage, once the marriage has begun, they are 3 times more likely to end up in divorce than couples that don't introduce it.
So maybe if you've already had that established in your relationship, it's not as big of an issue.
Yeah, no, and the thing is, the thing that we have to recognize is that most married people are watching. 90% of married men under 50 look at porn at least once a month. 60% of married women under 50 look at porn at least once a month. But I think that our parents, our grandparents, they were from such a puritanical time, such a conservative time. And then when, people your age and my age, we came of age, that's when the internet came of age, and we just kind of stood there and watched the world burn as we booked our trips around the world or played Candy Crush. And then the internet got high speed and it got in the hands of our kids and the next generation. And that's where we're seeing the real damage being done right now, is that pendulum has swung from what might have been too sexually conservative in the 1940s to, oh my God, way too sexually liberal in the 2020s, where now anybody with a webcam is their own entrepreneur porn star.
So do you think that porn is harmful just in general?
I think it absolutely can be. Yeah, absolutely can be. We know what it does to the brain for addicts, but we also know that it does have some short-term issues. Porn is what's causing all of this porn-induced erectile dysfunction out there. In 1995, men who were 20, 25 years old, they were experiencing erectile dysfunction at rates of 2 to 4%. These days, they're experiencing erectile dysfunction around 23 to 25%. And that's because of the high-speed internet. The fact that they can see a new sexual image every 2 seconds. Our little lizard brains were not designed to handle that. And, I probably, in 1 week of looking at pornography 10 years ago, saw more pornography than my grandfather did in his entire life. And that, and so what happens? And we're just starting to learn what happens. And it's not healthy. You've got, this incel culture that's growing up basically young porn addicts blaming women for their problems. And we've got this world where less and less people are having sex than before. If you look at statistics and rates of intercourse, they are dropping while rates of porn use go up because people are just using porn, satisfying themselves because other people are sick. Right before the pandemic started, my last appearance at a college, it was for a women's health group at their health center, a human sexuality and development group, and I did my song and dance presentation and moved to the Q&A. And there was a young woman there who asked, have you heard about women our age not wanting to have sex with virgin men? And I said, no, I haven't. And I could see the eyes light up of several of the women in the room. So we started talking about this, and they started talking about, and it made perfect sense when you think about it. If these boys are starting to watch porn at 13 or 14, and they're not getting the chance to have intercourse till they're 17 or 18, if they watched only 5 videos a week, you're still talking about hundreds of videos. Odds are most of those guys looked at thousands of videos. Now, we know that people like you and I who know what sex is, know what a healthy sexual relationship looks like, we know that porn is fake. We know that people don't have sex like that. But if you're a 14-year-old kid and your sex education is watching a guy slap a woman around and bend her as a pretzel, and not to even mention how all of these videos end in a very degrading way, that's not real life. But an 18-year-old guy finally gets lucky that one night, that girl says okay, and he turns into some kind of, sexual character straight out of a porn. And the female has to almost reteach him, no, you do not throw me down, you do not call me names, you do not treat me like this. And having talked with many groups of young ladies about this since then, I hear it again and again and again that it's just not worth it, because there's a generation of young men who are taking sexual cues from the absolute worst places. There was a study not too long ago, I don't remember what group did it, but they looked at 100 videos from the 2 top adult websites. 97% of the videos had some kind of aggression from the male towards the female. And that same group surveyed a bunch of young women, and 40% said in consensual sexual encounters that men had crossed the line with them when it came to aggression. That has to be the porn.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot in what you just said to kind of unpack. One of the things that I want to touch on, I know that you mentioned the people are not having as much sex these days. Now, I saw, and I don't have it in front of me, so I can't give you a link or anything, but I saw something that said men are having less sex these days than women. Is it also women that are having less sex now, or is it just men?
The stats I've seen are just people overall, but more women are watching porn than ever before. What's interesting is that when you think about it, for decades, pornography was geared towards the straight white male because you had adult theaters, you had magazines. It was expensive to create pornography. So you had to create it, and if you were going to make money at it, because it's a business, you had to go to the audience that you knew would buy. That was your straight white male. Now, theoretically, tomorrow, you and I can hire actors, get them to film their own scenes. We can cut it up in the afternoon and we can have it uploaded, making us money by the end of the day. And we can have it geared towards any ethnic group we want, any religious group we want, any weird fetish that we want. It doesn't cost nearly as much to produce porn and distribute it as it once did. So now you see all these smaller genres. And what's happening is black men and gay men and white women, these are some of the fastest growing sections of the porn addict community because the white males are already there. We were catered to before, high-speed internet and the niche creation of pornography as it happens today.
Yeah. Bite Mark has a question in the chat. She says... open up here. There we go. Do you feel like it's reasonable for a non-addicted partner of a porn-addicted person to continue consuming it on their own? And a follow-up, do you feel the same about other addicting things?
I think that as long as it's not causing symptoms of addiction with you, that it's not a problem. Not talking about anything about the moral aspect of pornography or trafficking or any of the baggage that comes with it. On a strictly, chemical personal level, I don't think it's a problem, but I think the bigger piece is, are you being honest with your partner? When my wife, she can drink wine, have a glass of wine, 1 or 2 a week, and that's fine for her. And we talked about it when I came back from rehab. Could I handle having alcohol in the house? And I can. I'm just one of those people who can. I know people who can't. It's too much of a temptation for them. Thankfully, she drinks stuff I just never liked. And I think that's kind of the same thing with pornography. It comes down to the communication, openly and honestly. And it's like saying, if my husband's a diabetic, does that mean I have to stop eating sugary treats? And the answer is no, but maybe you don't want to flaunt it in his face because that's just not a nice thing to do.
Yeah, and I'll say, so my ex-husband is an alcoholic, and whenever he started being sober, which I think now it's been, oh gosh, like 6 years. I think he just got his 6 year chip. But we had a conversation because I found out some information about his drinking habits that I didn't know about, which is what we started to have a conversation about. And then, he started going to AA and everything. And we had a conversation, and I said, I don't want to stop drinking. I'm not an alcoholic. And I went through my own, like, am I an alcoholic? Wait a minute, hold on. And I did a very real self-evaluation to make sure. But I said, does it bother you when I drink? Because if so, I'll get rid of all my wine. That's not a problem. We just won't have it in the house. I'll go drinking with a girlfriend. And that's it. I won't and his thing was, no, I don't care if you drink, but stop leaving your half full wine glass on the table. Because I had a huge habit of pouring myself a glass of wine, not finishing it, and just leaving it by the side of the counter or leaving it on the table or whatever. He was like, when you're done, just pour it out so that there's no temptation for me to just be like, that's wasteful. So I think it really does come back to communication with your partner in the case of alcohol addiction, in the case, it sounds like, of porn addiction as well. Talk to your partner about what bothers them, what doesn't, and what boundaries they need to set for themselves. And then you can set your own boundaries with them as well. That's a great question.
I don't sit at a bar anymore if I go to a bar. Yeah. I don't sit at the bar. I can sit at a chair further away. But I could probably sit at the bar now and be perfectly fine 8 years later. But for the first several years, I just didn't want that temptation. I remember once being in an airport, and it was the first time I was in an airport in about 20 years, and I was sober because I didn't realize it. But every time I got to an airport, I started drinking. And the first time I was sober in an airport, I actually had to go sit at a different gate because my gate was in front of a brew pub, and it was just way too triggering. You learn to deal with those triggers, and you learn where your barriers are. You learn how to cope with them, and I think you have to. I don't think you can run from your triggers. I think you have to learn to manage them.
Yeah, and that's definitely, it's just communication. So many times when we talk about relationships, and we talk about relationships in all kinds of ways, like we've had people specifically for communication in relationships, we've had people specifically for relationship therapy, like we've had all kinds of conversations with all kinds of experts, and 99% of what they say is communicate better. That's it. Communicate better. How do you coach your clients on their addiction to porn? What are some of the things or the steps that you have them take in the beginning when they come to you?
Well, a lot of it is, it's not that hard to get people to slow down. There are all kinds of different tools and little tips and techniques, but I start getting into origin story on day one, because I think that the way that I look at it is, if I can tell myself, create a narrative of how I became the person I am today, and have it make sense and live with it, and having made peace with the parts that I didn't want to address, the trauma, that's the most important part. People say, like, do you get triggered to drink? Do you get triggered to use pornography? And I really don't, because I dealt with that trauma. I drank because of the trauma, and with it not being there, I don't have a reason to drink. I don't have a reason to look at porn. So I get into that pretty much from day one. Is let's start talking about statistics with porn addiction. Dr. Patrick Carnes, who's kind of the godfather of study in this area, he had a groundbreaking study just as the internet was popping up, where he interviewed, I think it was something like 3,000 men in America. And what he found was that just over 70% had unresolved trauma because of physical abuse when they were young. Just over 80% had unresolved trauma because of sexual abuse when they were young. And over 92%, I think it was around 95%, had some kind of unresolved trauma because of emotional or mental abuse when they were young. So if you can do the stats on that, it's like 3 out of 1,000 guys won't have some kind of trauma with them if they are a porn addict. So when guys are like, nope, nothing ever happened to me, it's like, okay, well, we're going to talk about trauma doesn't mean that your dad beat the crap out of you. Trauma doesn't mean that you have an older cousin that touched you. Trauma can mean so many other things. And a lot of it is just educating them to what trauma really is. It's not just your Lifetime movie freak show or your after school special. Trauma is bullying. Trauma is being lied to. Trauma is so many things. And that when you start to uncover it with them, that's when they're, oh, yes, this happened, this happened, this happened. I never recognized that stuck with me. I never thought that would be considered trauma. And that's where I have to, that's where I go from day one, because like I said, with that center I went to in Argyle, so much of it was about creating a narrative that we could live with. And even if I know people are creating a narrative that may not be 100% true, if it's one that they can live with, that they can cope with, that they can make sense of for themselves, that's what I think the most important thing is, being able to move forward without needing that crutch of pornography.
Yeah. Last week we had a guest on who talked about the definition of trauma, and I was trying to pull it up. I can't remember the name of the person that she was talking about. Oh, I know why, because I'm typing it in wrong. But it was too much, too soon. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna pull it up so I don't say this wrong, because sure, it was great. It was fantastic, and I had never heard it defined that way. So this is the one with Julie Hall from last week. Resma Menachem's definition of trauma is anything that happens to you that's too much, too fast, too soon, or too long, coupled with something reparative that should have happened that didn't. And so that, to me, like, that broadens it up. Like, trauma is not just you got into a car accident. Trauma is not just you went to war. It's anything that happened too much, too fast, too soon, or too long, and that was not resolved. That's it. Or too little. I think she added the too little. Yeah. So...
no, that's a perfect definition. And, we all have trauma, like you mentioned earlier, and getting some, it's something sitting with somebody and, talking about pornography for the first time. Some of these men who are 50 years old, 55 years old, who talk to me, they've never talked to another person about pornography and not been judged. And you can see their body language change. It just kind of relax. And then, you start talking about the stuff from their youth. And, a lot of times they'll start crying. They'll start having emotional experiences over this, because nobody has ever just sat there and heard their story. They didn't think it was worth telling. They didn't think anybody would care. They thought people would judge them or people would abandon them. And just the simple act of sitting there and saying, like, that must have really sucked, does so much for them sometimes.
Yeah, just being able to work through it, to talk about it openly without that fear of judgment. It's tough. I mean, we have in our community Discord, we have a sex positivity channel where we can talk about things, but I have to gatekeep it, because it can't just be an open thing because anybody can join the Discord. You have to have manual permissions for this channel. And I've had people say, like, hey, can I get access to that? I'm like, nope, you're brand new. Sorry. We gotta know that you're not a dick, basically. Yep. That's what we need.
If you're gonna talk about dicks, you can't be one.
That's right. Exactly. But it's such a nice thing to have a safe space to talk about things, or to ask a question. Hey, I had this happen. Is this normal? Has anybody else experienced this? And it's not like we're professional anythings in there. We're just people comparing experiences. And so to have something like that where it's a safe space, I think takes a lot of the pressure off. And so many people don't have something like that at all. and never have.
Absolutely. No, it's like I said, just a 60-minute first time meeting. You can watch the person almost like melt into comfort talking about it. And it's such a gift to be able to see that and to see the person just at the end of the hour be like, this was amazing. And that's kind of the transformative experience that I'm talking about is, sometimes they never come back to me and I don't know what happens to them, but I know that they had that chance to say something. And hopefully they go on and find other methods for getting help. But just being able to do that even one time, I think, is like bringing 1,000,000 pounds off their shoulders.
Do you ever have anyone say that they don't believe in porn addiction, and how do you handle that if it happens?
I usually at this point just say that there is enough data out there that it absolutely is an addiction. That, why do you feel it's not an addiction? Why is it in your best interest for it to not be an addiction? And if they want to argue, I don't join in that fight. You want to believe that? That's cool. You want to believe the earth is flat? That's cool. I can prove otherwise. But I'm not going to get into the muck with you and talk about this. There are too many people out there that need help.
Yeah. And the point of saying, why is it in your best interest for it not to be an addiction? That cuts.
Yeah. Or, well, actually, if I really want to be that dick you're talking about, what I'll often say is, I hope that you are able to continue with this ignorance the rest of your life and never find out the truth.
Yeah.
So it's a way of calling someone ignorant without actually doing it.
Yeah. You're getting into being a Southerner there.
Yeah.
You're getting into the bless your heart territory there.
Yeah, exactly. Your heart's in the right place.
Yeah.
3 feet below your head.
Right. We talked about this briefly already, but I want to kind of really hit on the point. Does porn addiction equate to infidelity, or does it typically go hand in hand with infidelity in some way?
Not necessarily. Most people who end up with intercourse addiction did start along the way with porn addiction. But simply because you are a porn addict, it rarely devolves into infidelity. In men, I believe it's something like 20%. In females, it's higher than that. I think that's just because it's easier for females to get sex. But no, there is no true correlation to, okay, you're probably cheating on me because of this.
Okay. Have you ever had any clients blame infidelity on porn addiction or sex addiction when it was really something else?
Oh, I've had clients blame everything on everything. The amount of the biggest one is the amount of men who say, well, I only used porn because I was bored. And then I have I'll just rattle off, well, why don't you call your grandma, paint a picture, learn origami, learn to play the flute, go for a long walk, go for a drive, learn about Mount Fuji. There is no reason you ever need to be bored in this world. There's just too much to do. It's just giving yourself permission to use. And I think that's, rationalization and minimization are in addiction all across the board, the two greatest tools that we use. And addicts, in the last, I think it was even one of the big dictionary companies called gaslighting the word of 2021 or 2022. And I think that the addict, yes, I should have had a PhD in gaslighting, but I gaslit myself more than anyone else. And that's what the addict gaslights themselves. The addict looks in the mirror and sees who they need to see, tells themselves the story they need to hear. And that's that's the biggest thing about it. We gaslight ourselves long before we gaslight anybody else.
Yeah. That's something I think I remember that was the word of the year. And whenever I saw that was the word of the year, I was very disappointed. And then I put it out of my brain.
A movie from 1943 that really wasn't very good to begin with, 80 years later can be the word of the year and everybody's using it. I think that's kind of cool. And that movie had Angela Lansbury in it. And I think she was still alive when they announced the word. So yeah, hopefully she enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other topic. Gaslighting's a whole other topic. We could do a whole stream just on gaslighting, because it's talk about ways that people blame their shit on other things.
Yeah, like I said, I was so good at that I could make myself believe my BS the moment it came out of my mouth. That's why I was a good politician. I could make myself believe. I could make myself believe the crap that came out of my mouth the second I said it. And I would pass a polygraph because I honestly believed the crap that came out of my mouth.
How does someone recover after the discovery of infidelity in a marriage?
It depends exactly how it hits them. It depends what their goals are. But it's often, it's the first place that I start is to make sure that the person who is suffering from the betrayal understands that it's not their fault. And it doesn't matter what the betrayer has to say. It's like for the porn addiction in me, I was a porn addict at 12 years old. I met my wife when I was 26. How could she have anything to do with it? She can't. The seeds of addiction, 90% of the time, are sown before somebody is 18 years old. And I make sure that this isn't about you being pretty or you not being pretty or gaining a few pounds. This isn't about how you perform in bed or the fact that you won't do crazy things because it's beyond your boundaries. I'll tell them, you could bring your best friend to bed with you and your husband, and tomorrow he's just going to want another friend. It has nothing to do with you. That's the most important thing. I think just to be able to function, to move forward, is to really drill home the point that it is not them. And then that's when you get into the layer of, what actually was going on, and the fact that they're not stupid. They weren't looking for it. So, you get these guys who have lied about their porn use or infidelity 10, 15 years. You can understand why a partner is left wondering, how can I trust this person? How can I believe that this person hid their sins for 15 years, knew very well that infidelity was wrong, or knew very well how I felt about pornography, and still ignored me and still went to it? Even if they are sick, that doesn't mean that they get a pass on it. They could have done something about it much, much earlier. And what else might they be lying about? What else? Do they have another life? What is going on there? I describe it to people in the most simple terms as, imagine I took you outside and said to you, the sky is yellow, and you're like, oh, bull crap. And then I pull out a couple lenses that you didn't know were in your eyes since you've been a kid, and ta-da, the sky is yellow. That is going to rock your world, because it is a bedrock foundation piece. And I think that those who are especially susceptible to betrayal trauma have experienced previous traumas in their life. And I think betrayal trauma is just kind of a 2023 catchphrase way of saying my latest trauma from the last person who I expected it from. Mm-hmm. And that's what you have to recognize, is that there was this huge loss of trust, and it is one-sided, and that they have to go through a process. And some go through fast, some take a very long time, some unfortunately get stuck there for way too long. But it's a unique process to everyone, much like recovery from porn addiction is.
Yeah, and I equate the discovery piece of that typically to like the going through a grief cycle. It's different. It's different for every single person. Every single person goes through it completely differently. And no matter how you're reacting, I mean, unless you're like going to murder, you're not wrong. Whatever your reaction is, it's not wrong.
Absolutely.
Except murder. Murder is wrong.
Yeah, I agree with you. Please play that at my trial.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Is reconciliation always the answer after infidelity?
No. Sometimes things are just too irreparably harmed. Sometimes things are just too broken. Sometimes it's not in your best interest to go back to trusting this person. Sometimes it's not in your kid's best interest for them being around this person, especially if they don't change their behavior, if they're not serious about it. I'm only still with my wife because she saw me do the hard work in recovery to get better. Fortunately, I was one of those guys that when the intervention happened, it was like, thank God. Let's start fixing this stuff. And if the betrayer doesn't have that attitude, why keep yourself there in a constant cycle of this grief, of this betrayal, of reliving this every day? I absolutely don't think that reconciliation is always the answer. I don't think that leaving the person is always the answer either. I think it's, again, very individualized per person.
Yeah. And it's a very personal decision. I would say after you discover infidelity, just like after you lose someone that you love and you go through that grief cycle, give yourself time to think it through, to work it out, not to try to work it out with the other person, to work it out with yourself, what you really want and what serves you best, would be from a personal, having gone through something like that multiple times, and ultimately left because it was multiple times, even after we did the work. Sit with it within yourself and work out what you need.
Yeah, and just early on, create a safety plan. How can you get out? How can you survive, even if it's only for 2 days without that person? Because when you are in a traumatic, shocking situation, if you have your plan in place, it's going to be much easier to follow it. If you have to grab the kids and leave at 3 a.m., it's going to be much easier if you already have a plan in place. If you already have a few $100s squirreled away somewhere, or your friend knows that you could be showing up at any time to spend the night at their place. Have a plan in place. Always have plans. And it's funny, there's a lot of parallels between dealing with somebody who's in recovery and someone who is getting through betrayal trauma. About planning, about thinking about the next thing, about, learning about yourself. A whole lot of the betrayal trauma work I do has nothing to do with the current trauma. It has to do with all the earlier traumas that happened to the person that, they're just somebody who, in a lot of cases, has been traumatized again and again and again, and they never worked it out early on. And I don't know, I've not seen any statistics about people who are traumatized, if they tend to flock towards people who are going to create trauma for them. But there's got to be something to it. There's something in that water that creates those kinds of situations again and again and again. And I think you need to be able to step outside that situation, look at yourself, look at what happened, look at what went on, and really plot a course for your safety and for your future sanity.
Yeah. And it goes back also, with the parallels to addiction recovery, but you got to address that shit. Like, it's a trauma. It really is a trauma. You have to address it in, hopefully, therapy. But in some way, you have to face it. You can't just sweep it under the rug, because that is truly a trauma. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, that's where I have the most heartache, is when I'll talk to a woman who sneaks to have a session with me online one time, and she can't leave because of money. She has nowhere to go. She, this, that, or the other, all valid reasons. but just feeling stuck, like they have no leverage, they have no solutions, they are in a no-win situation. So, their boorish husband or boyfriend gets a free pass because they don't see a better path. And there is always a better path.
Yeah. And I think also with the safety plans that you're talking about, that it includes involving someone else. And you're going to, depending on the relationship that you're in, you could get pushback from your partner to say, like, no one else needs to know our business. Fuck that. Someone else needs to know your business. At that point, someone else needs to know.
Absolutely. If you just need your best friend to be a cheerleader for you, that's fine. They're not a therapist. Don't make that mistake.
No.
But if you just need a cheerleader there for you to say, boy, that must be tough, that can make all the difference in the world, not feeling alone.
Yeah. Absolutely. Habitual abusers can pick out the behavior patterns that some traumatized people develop and will target them. Oh, that's why it happens repeatedly. They're not bad at picking, they're being targeted. That's interesting. I feel like that probably has some merit. I don't know where you're getting that statement from, but I definitely feel like that could have some real merit, because if someone else can pick up, all right, my next person that I want has these characteristics, same characteristics as the last person that I was able to pull the wool over their eyes on. All right, let's find somebody with those same characteristics and see how long it'll take before I get caught again.
And I think that's natural. You look at my uncle and his current wife and his 3 ex-wives, and they could all be sisters. I don't think there's anything weird going on there, but people repeat patterns.
Yeah.
And if all you know how to do is find somebody who, has daddy issues, is 10 to 20 years younger than you, and you know how to sweet talk a certain type of person, or you know how to treat a certain type of person, why are you going to go outside your comfort zone?
Yep. True. Are there any activities or tools or exercises that you use with your clients who've experienced that betrayal, either of infidelity in the form of cheating or porn addiction that they've hidden, that you think that everyone would benefit from, regardless of whether they have a porn addiction or have experienced infidelity, etc.?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of, I think if everybody on earth spent 3 minutes a night doing band of light meditation, that would make the world such a calmer place. And band of light meditation is essentially just you lay in one spot and you imagine a curtain of light at your feet, and you take it just slowly up your body. And as that piece of light goes across a part of your body, wiggle it or flex it or move it. Get to know your entire body. Get to know the entire feelings of the body. And one of the things that I like to challenge my people who use it is, before you start doing this, as it comes to your eyes and leaves your head, try to have that band of light last 3 minutes. And as you hit start on a stopwatch on your phone and see if you can get it to be 3 minutes. And it's interesting because there's a certain type of person who gets it done in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. And there's a certain type of person who gets it done in 4 minutes. And it's really interesting how people with addictions, how people with trauma, how people who are going through crisis, how they view time. And I think one of the things, and again, this is just a theory of mine, I believe if we can harness time, if we can understand time as it exists, as we measure it, I think it makes the body completely calmer. Like I can do a 5-minute band of light meditation and get it within about 5 seconds either way.
Yeah.
But that took a lot of work.
Interesting. I wonder if that would help with like executive dysfunction as well. If you're having some like, I can't figure out, or what is it? Time blindness. Like if you practice this and you aim for a certain set of time, I wonder if that would help orient yourself at all if you did that something daily.
And the thing is, I can't meditate. I'm sorry, but I have, people say they get a song caught in their head. I've got 3 songs caught in my head at all times. And I'm watching 3 TV shows in my head at all times. And when I hear people say, okay, clear your mind, it's like, oh, if you could teach me how to do that, that's all I would need to know. I can't do that. So Band of Light meditation allows you to focus on something as simple as your body, but you're at least you're able to think of something. At least you're able to focus. And you're able to get that mind and body connection together. Because I believe over the next 100 years, science is going to find so many more connections between mind and body. We are still in the Wild West, early Stone Age when it comes to mental illness and mental health. And I think that it's only going to get better. And I think the direct connections between a healthy body and a healthy mind are going to be less theory and more concrete.
I certainly hope so. There are so many things that we just don't understand. I think addiction is one of them. I think obesity is another. It's just one of those things that we don't know everything, and the doctors pretend like they know everything, and they don't. And it's tough. But I do hope that research is a little more equitable as it moves forward. That is my hope, is that everything becomes more equitable across sex, gender, race, everything. Because, like you were saying earlier, up until a certain point, things catered to biggest common denominator, which was straight white males. So it's hard to say that even research that's done today is equitable. So I hope as we move forward and they do make some of those connections and discoveries that it's for everyone.
That's why no money is going towards porn addiction research, is because in Washington you have a bunch of straight white men who probably don't even know how to use the internet in a lot of cases. And you're talking about a disease that's affecting 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds. And they don't, and they are of the generation still that, if you can't see it, there's no boo-boo.
Lord, I hope that if every...
I just heard the Texas come out of you right there.
Yes. If every politician in Washington could learn to use the internet, and then I hope that they only find memes of themselves. That's what I hope.
Their narcissism would just like it.
Yeah, well, maybe. That might be true. All right, well, it is time for our magic moment. So I have a magic wand here. This is my beautiful magic wand. So if you could wave this magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health and addiction, what would it be? And I'll just give this a little wave.
Ooh. It would be for people to somehow stop believing that it can't happen to them. It's not as bad as it was 5 years ago when I'm thinking about porn addiction, but I think people looked at porn addiction and thought about the 19-year-old guy living in his mom's basement who never kissed a girl in real life, or the sleazy 60-year-old flasher in the park. This is who porn addicts are. When I was in my porn addict rehab in Texas, I met men and women ranging from 18 to 60 years old, doctors, lawyers, nurses. It is like alcoholism. It is like drug abuse. It is not just perverts. It is not. For so many years in this country, we treated people with opioid and opiate problems like they were from the bad side of town. They were from the bad side of the tracks. Nancy Reagan wanted us to just say no to them. And instead of saying, do you need any help? Which is what we should have been saying. And that only became a cause once enough politicians' kids started dying from it. And we were 30 years too late on that. I wish that, Washington could wake up and realize what's happening with the youngest generations, because I don't want to wait 30 years until these 30-year-olds are there and remember what the problem was like with the pornography, because we don't have that kind of time to waste.
Absolutely. Listen, vote for young people is what I'm going to say. Just vote for young people. Obviously, make sure that your views are aligned with the young people, but if you have a choice between old person views aligned, young person views aligned, vote for the young person.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of these things where every generation thinks the previous generation were sticks in the mud, and every generation thinks the next generation's out of their mind. And why can't we be the generation that stops that and goes, this is the generation that goes into the future? The world is not going to come to an end with our kids or our grandkids. That's just not going to happen because our parents and our grandparents thought it would with us. That's not what's going to happen. This tribalism, this generationalism, it has to go. I'm sorry, my grandparents were not the greatest generation. I am sorry. I don't know what was, but it wasn't them.
Yeah, I honestly, I have hope for the next several generations being good repairers for everything. Yes. I really do think that there's going to be a lot of, like you were talking about, research that makes a lot of connections. But I really do think that the generation that my generation is raising is going to be a good one. And I hope that continues on down generations. I hope we just keep raising better than ourselves continually.
I hope so too. And I think we can.
I agree. Well, I'm going to open it up. Any remaining Q&A, folks in the chat, if you have any questions for our guest tonight, feel free to just write it into the chat. We'll get those answered. And then I'll just ask you, Josh, if there's anything that you want to throw out there, any resources we haven't mentioned, anything we haven't touched on that you wanted to make sure you touch on. And I will go ahead and put your socials one more time in the chat as well. But I'll just hand the stage to you for a little bit.
Yeah, the only thing that I wanted to also add or talk about, and I've been talking about this more recently, is to be careful. Anybody out there who is getting into the business of pornography. And I'm talking about these websites like OnlyFans, where it's the do-it-yourself porn at home. And yeah, I know stripping on a stage is something that most people could never do, but it sure is a lot easier to set up a webcam on one side of your room and do a little dance. And, 50 guys pay $20. There's $1,000. That can be pretty sweet. But I think that during the pandemic, we saw January 1st, 2020, OnlyFans had 300,000 content creators. 2 years later, January 1st, 2022, OnlyFans had over 2 million content creators. My third book I wrote, which was called Porn in the Pandemic, I looked at how the industry exploded during the first few months of the pandemic, and this included the do-it-at-home pornography with the cam sites and these types of things. I interviewed people early on in this, right when the pandemic was starting, people who were displaced because they were hostesses or bartenders. They worked in retail. Everything that shut down, they still had to pay their bills, so they ended up in this type of business. Now, 6 months later, when things started opening up and I was finishing my research, I talked to some, and for some, it was still transactional in nature at all. But for a lot, they were telling me, oh, I feel special when I do this. I was only going to do this 1 hour a day. Now I do it 4 hours a day. And it doesn't even matter if I make money some days. Just going on and talking with these great people. And, I can't get a date in real life, but I have men from around the world who want to bring me out on their yacht or fly me to them. And what I heard was addiction. What I heard was a dopamine rush. What I heard was a coping mechanism, a way to escape reality. And I truly believe in the next 10 years or so, we're going to start to see the fallout of all of this do it yourself at home pornography. Back in the 80s when you only had videotapes or adult theaters, what was there? A couple hundred porn stars at any given time. Now you're talking about millions around the world. We're going to see a fallout from this, and we don't know what it is yet. But I think pornography addiction is the same coin. One side is the people who consume it. The other side can be the people who produce it. And you see that in a lot of these people. So if anybody out there is thinking about doing any of this stuff, I'm not a porn addict, and I'm not a prude. I don't mind. I got a good body. I can do this. Really think about it, because we don't know what the long-term ramifications are of it. We don't know the mental health of people 20, 30 years later. I think that whole, well, what are you going to do if your picture shows up in 20 years? I think that is moot at this point. There's so many naked pictures out there, and it just doesn't faze the youngest generation, that I don't think that's going to come back to haunt them. I think the actual scars, the actual trauma of doing it may come back to haunt them. So think about it before you do it. That's my main that's the main thing that I've been trying to push lately, because I just think that it's playing with fire.
Yeah, a lot of self-reflection. Again, communicate with yourself, figure out what you want. Maybe go to a little therapy first, and if in the end, after all of that, you're being really honest with yourself, and you're like, yeah, actually, I do want to do this, then all right. But yeah, most definitely. Also, if you have people just offering to, like, fly you to them, that sounds like a damn good way to get murdered. So just be careful. Like, be safe.
Yeah. But it makes so many of these people feel special, feel unique.
Absolutely. I get it. I get that. Yep.
Yeah. So, but I think that's it. I think that I can see a world in 20 years where there are, 40 and 50-year-old men and women who are still doing this, not because they're getting paid well, but because they're still getting that dopamine high or that oxytocin high of somebody caring about them, somebody paying attention to them, that they just don't get in their real life. And it's kind of tragic in a way.
Yeah. Fight Mark says, yeah, Mama, think long and hard before you fire up your OnlyFeed. Listen, my OnlyFeed has been going great. I don't know what you're talking about. I would never. My feet are awful. I want to say thanks so much for being here. I learned a lot and enjoyed the time. Yes. And then 480 says, thanks for streaming. Yes, absolutely. All right, y'all. Well, I'm going to disconnect with Josh offline. Give me just a few minutes and I will be right back. And Josh, thank you so much for taking the time tonight. I really appreciate this conversation.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed it.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, give me just a minute.
I hope that this discussion on pornography addiction and infidelity and betrayal trauma has brought awareness and understanding to this complex and often challenging topic. If you or someone you know is struggling with pornography addiction, I encourage you to seek professional help from therapists, support groups, or specialized treatment centers. Remember, you don't have to face this battle alone, and there is support available to you. I also want to extend my empathy and support to those who have experienced betrayal trauma. Healing from infidelity and such a deep betrayal takes time and support. Those of you who have heard part of my own story or read it on my website understand that I know that very, very well and very personally. I encourage you to seek out therapists specializing in trauma and relationship counseling to navigate the path towards healing and, if possible, rebuilding trust. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear from you, so feel free to share your thoughts and experiences with me on social media or through our website, tacosfallapart.org. And if you found this episode informative or helpful, please consider leaving a review or rating on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us reach more people. Thank you for joining me today on Even Tacos Fall Apart. I appreciate your support and hope that this podcast continues to serve as a source of hope, inspiration, and understanding. Remember, even when tacos fall apart, there's always the opportunity for growth, healing, and the rebuilding of relationships. Until next time, be kind to yourself and be kind to others.